It's time to do a tier list for all the players following Major 3. For more CDL content, make sure to sub to the channel. I'm going to start posting a little bit more CDL content because it's my favorite esport, one I've been following for a long time, and let's get right into this tier list. Now, real quick, this tier list is obviously based off my own opinions, but I am using statistics as a baseline measurement as to how to rank these players. So I do have my own sort of formula that I created that sort of encompasses all the stats that have to do with the players that is on the Breaking Point website, and I use those stats to come up with sort of an overall rating, almost like FIFA or 2K if you know those games, for each of these players. So I am using that to determine the players' ratings, as well as using my own individual opinions to add on to that. So let's just kick it off. We'll go in order of team. BZ S tier, not too much to say. BZ is a top 5 player in this game without a doubt, and without a doubt is an S tier player. Then for Celium, technically by my formula, Celium is actually more of an A tier player, but just due to his sheer impact on the map, I'm gonna put him in S just because I think the statistics and control actually aren't as good as what people think. Yes, he has a high KD, but his overall kills and damage around the map isn't actually that high, but we're gonna still put him at S because he's just an absolutely phenomenal player. Then we move into Simp, who I do think is an A tier player. He makes a lot of impact plays and a lot of big clutch moments, and we saw that at the major, but he just hasn't been performing the way we used to know Simp a couple of years back, so I'm gonna have him in A. And then Slasher actually performed pretty well this stage, but had a pretty disappointing major, and overall hasn't been amazing throughout the year, so I'm gonna put him in B tier. I do think the online qualifier for this stage, he was amazing, but I can say that he's probably right around the B tier. Now, starting off with the Boston Breach, we will start with Beans, who is an A tier player in my eyes. One of the best SND players actually in the game right now. Had an amazing first match against OPTIC at the major, definitely deserving of A tier. Same thing with his teammate Nero. Nero is also another player who just absolutely amazing with the amount of engagements he gets in, the amount of gunfights he's able to win in big plays he's able to make. It's just pretty exceptional. Similarly, his sub duo also gets in as many engagements. It's Vivid. Vivid is probably more of a B tier though. He just doesn't win as many gunfights as someone like Nero, but he does, you know, really get up in your face and make a lot of plays and have a big effect on the map. And then we also have Awakening, who is also an A tier player. I mean, Big Wake has been playing really good this year. A little disappointing on LAN. I might have put him in S tier had he performed a little bit better on LAN. Definitely, I would say probably their best player on their team, but they have overall a really solid team, hence why they place top 4. Then we move on to Florida. Now, overall, the Florida team isn't anything too crazy. Let me actually slide Major Maniac and Vickle out and throw Fellow, and where did Cap go? And Capital here. Overall, the Florida team, you know, they're very hit or miss. They play very well sometimes, other times they don't look as good. Personally, for me, I think, you know, I think Brack, Havoc, and Cap are C tier and Fellow is D tier. Obviously a bottom of the table type team, able to bring up some upsets and make some big wins happen, but overall this team is, you know, they're not the best team, and you know that kind of shows here with these tiers. Now for LAG. Now LAG is an interesting team. They had a very short major, obviously only played one series. Arcides is a guy who literally played one map at the major, but this year is just not performing well. I'm gonna have to put him in the D tier. I don't want to do that to Arcides. You know, Arcides is a great player. He's the 2-time world champion, an amazing player, one of the best of all time, you know, top 10, top 15 for sure. But right now this season not playing too well. His teammates in Joe Deceives, Exceed, and Assault are obviously playing much better. I think these guys can all be pushed between B and C. Personally, I think Assault was probably their best player overall this stage, and I think the other two have their moments. Exceed is really good at search and destroy, especially when it comes to using the sniper, but for now I'm just gonna slot them into C. Now on to the LA Thieves, a team who have been underperforming, struggling a bit, didn't play obviously as good as we would expect out of them. So far this entire, I mean, they made it to the final in Major 2, but this past stage not as good as we'd expect, and this major. Envoy though, best player on their team in my opinion, and the stats back this up. I would put him in the A tier. Kenny on the other hand, I mean, Kenny has been very disappointing. C tier for Ken in my opinion. He's been just super lackluster, without a doubt the worst player on their team. You could even make a case to put him in D tier, but statistically he's not as bad as the other players in D tier, so I'm going to put him in C. And then Draza and Octane are going to go into the B tier. I think both of these players have their moment. Octane is actually underrated. When you look at his stats, he's pretty bad at search and destroy, but in the respawn game modes, he actually plays better than you'd realize. Next up, we do have the London Royal Ravens. Now, starting off with their sub duo in Asim and Nasty, both of them B tier. Asim is inconsistently consistent, or he's consistently inconsistent, however you want to say it. He's really good, but I feel like he's also really inconsistent, but he somehow manages to keep himself as like middle of the pack type player, so that puts him right here in B tier. And then Nasty actually had an amazing major. He was one of like the top, I think, like 3 or 5 in overall KD. They did only play one series, but had a really good series against OPTIC. He looked like prime Scump out there, and it's not just the ginger resemblance. But then Scraps, we have Scraps and Paul X, the ARs. Scraps probably in the C and Paul probably in the D. Both of these players a bit underwhelming. Overall, you know, London definitely needs to figure something out, but I think their sub duo is solid. They just need to find a consistency together. Next up, we do have the Las Vegas Legion. Now, this one is tough for me because statistically, this team is not the greatest. Obviously, they're towards the bottom of the league, and overall their individual stats as players as well isn't as good, but the run that they made at the major and the performances that they put on really showed just how good they could be, and it definitely makes it tough to judge this team. But I'm going to do my best. I'm going to put Temp in the A tier. I do think he's their best player, as he has been on the Legion for a very long time, but I do think Temp overall is their best player. I think Clayster, you could argue putting him in an A tier, but I'm going to put him in B because this is supposed to be looking at the entire year, not just performances at the major. If it was just based on the major, probably A tier. I mean, the guy was frying. The whole team was actually frying for the most part. And then we get into Prolu, or yeah, we do have Prolu here, but that's not who I was looking for. We get into Too Real and TJ Halley. I'm gonna put them both in the C tier. Too Real honestly could probably go in the D tier. He had some good plays at the major, but overall this season, I think statistically, based on the rating system that I generated, he's actually the worst current player in the league, I believe. So overall, definitely could use some improvements, but at the major, he definitely showed, you know, somewhat what he's capable of. Next up, we do have the Minnesota Rocker, arguably the most disappointing, not even arguably, they're definitely the most disappointing team of this season. Started out good. You thought they'd be good looking at them on paper when they first formed, but this team just not playing well. Afro, easily their best player by a long shot. Just looking at my rating system, Afro is over 10 points higher than the rest of his team. So he is definitely a better player. And if you're interested in seeing my rating system, drop a comment down below. I could definitely make a video talking about it. But then we get into Attach, Bance, and Cammy. All of them, honestly, probably in the C tier. You might be able to argue moving them up to B tier if you wanted. But overall, this team is just super disappointing. Afro needs a little bit more consistency out of his teammates. They looked really good at, was it Major 2? I think it was Major 1 or Major 2 where Bance and Afro were frying as a sub duo, but just haven't been able to hit that form again. Then we have the New York Subliners, probably the most disappointing team at the major, considering they were in winners bracket and they just could not make it happen. Obviously, Minnesota's most disappointing overall, but they were 0-5 going into the major, so not disappointing performance at the major. But Hydra obviously is an S tier player. There's no other way about it. He's really such an impactful slayer on the map, and he does so many good things for his team, and he's the kind of player that can actually just take over and win you a map on his own. And there's not that many players that can really like individually win you a map. There's players that can take over and make a big play, maybe secure a hill or win around and search, but Hydra's the kind of guy that can literally win you a map on his own. Then moving to his duo and Kismet, I do think you could put Kiz in S tier, but I'm gonna put him in A tier. I think this sub duo can be the best in the game. They just need to continue to play how they're playing, and hopefully, I think it's their ARs that need to step up behind them to sort of bring this team back to the level they were that we saw at Major 1. But Priesta and Skies both kind of disappointing. I'm gonna put Skies in B and Priesta in C. I do think both of these players, Priesta was really good in the beginning of the year. Skies has been pretty underrated for a lot of the last few years, but overall these guys have just kind of been in the middle, not really doing too much recently, hence why I kind of dropped them down from where I might have put them if we were talking about this maybe pre-major or pre, you know, just Major 3 in general. Now we have the Seattle Surge, a very interesting team coming in as the #1 seed in this major, but a team that has been heavily underperforming throughout the entire year. You know, made some good runs at some majors, but overall pretty disappointing. disappointing. Accuracy, you know, he brings a lot of intangibles to this team, but just looking at stats and just how he kind of plays in the moments they need him most, gonna go in the D tier. He hasn't even been playing that good in Search and Destroy this year, which is kind of his bread and butter. You know, Iceman, obviously we know his nickname, we know what he can do, but this year I know he brings the leadership, but kind of gonna slide in the D tier. Similarly, Mac sort of has his moments, has really big series and some big time plays, probably more of a C tier player, just not really finding the consistency you want out of Mac. I know he's going in first for Pred and kind of baiting, and Pred's getting the kill, so he does enable Pred very well, but just talking about it, you know, statistically he just has not been good, and I can't really put him higher than C. And then Pred, obviously, is S tier player. He's the best player in the league. Based on my rating system, he's the best player in the league, and based on my own opinion, he's the best player in the league. Without a doubt, he has to be S tier. And Sib, a player that you could argue A or S, I'm gonna put him in S personally. This major was a little lackluster for Sib. I think he had some moments where he just kind of wasn't performing to what we'd expect out of him, but I'm gonna still put him in S tier. I think, you know, I think there's a few S tier players. There's definitely like a handful of S tier players in the league, and I think he could be one of them. Now we move on into the Major 3 champions, Toronto Ultra, a team that is, you know, just super good. I gotta slot Standy out of here and slot Hixie in here, but this is definitely a team that, for me personally, and I gotta put Ghosty in over here for Optic, but this is a team for me that has been really good all year long. A team that I, you know, is thinking was going to be top 3. I actually had them in my pick'ems, which I didn't make a video on, but I had them losing to LA Thieves in the final, so I got them going to the final right, but I didn't get the Thieves part or them losing right. I think, you know, Kleenex, probably their second best player. I think Kleenex is a really good player and definitely deserving of A tier. He was performing very well, and now with him playing with Hixie as comparison to Standy, Hixie enables Kleenex a lot. I think Standy is a very good slaying SMG, and Hixie is more of a sort of do-it-all role filler type SMG, which allows Kleenex and the rest of the team to sort of slay out a little bit more, which obviously has benefited them greatly. Insight overall has been decent. Honestly, he's, so from a statistics standpoint, pretty disappointing, but being as they won the major, I'm gonna put him up in the B tier. I probably would have put him in C had they not won the major. He's just been a little bit disappointing, but overall is a good player and can really play his life. He's one of the, it's very interesting, he has one of the higher KDs in the league, but he is on the lower end when it comes to kills. So he actually doesn't get as many kills as a lot of other players, but he also doesn't die nearly as much as other players. So very good at playing his life. Another player, your major MVP, Scrappy, a top 3 player in the league, just absolutely phenomenal player. Rookie year, and he's already, you know, S tier MVP at a major win, definitely deserving of the S tier. And then Hixie, you know, like I said, sort of do it all. He does it all. I'm gonna put him in the B tier. Statistically, he is their worst player, but I'm gonna put him in B because they won the major. He had a lot of really great plays, especially against Optic in that final, and definitely proved his worth and made it obvious that the move for him and Standy definitely worked. And last but not least, we do have the second place team, the home team, Optic Texas from Major 3. Now this team is interesting, right? They didn't look, I mean, when they lost to Boston in that first winners round, it was looking really bad. They honestly looked like probably the worst team at the major, the way they lost that. But overall, they definitely stepped it up. And I think, you know, just such a great team. Let me move Illy over a little bit. Dashy, I'm gonna put him in the A tier. He's had a little bit of an underperforming year if you want to compare him to last year because of how good he was in Vanguard. I think overall Dashy is still a great player. You could argue S tier. He had a lot of big moments in big maps, but I'm gonna put him in A. Then we do have the man himself, Ghosty. He, I think, also similarly to Hixie, is probably more of a C tier player statistically, but he, or even D tier honestly, but the way he was able to make big plays, enable his teammates to play better, and considering they made the finals, probably worthy of B tier. Then we have Shotzi, I think is an A tier or an S tier player personally. Statistically, maybe more of an A tier player, but the way he played at this major, he was looking like that, you know, MW MVP Shotzi that we saw back in 2020. It was awesome to see. One of the hardest people to kill, made a lot of great plays, needs to get not go in the water as much on Zarqwa, but other than that, really great player in every game mode. And then we do have Hook, who I think had a good major, a lot of great plays, but I'm gonna put him in the B tier just because overall this season has definitely had some struggles. But yeah, this is my tier list following Major 3. Let me know what you think down below. What do you really agree with or really don't disagree with? Like I said, this is based on statistics, the rating system that I developed that I can make a video on if you're interested in, as well as my own personal opinion and what happened at the major watching that. Since I watched most matches, honestly, I missed a couple like losers round 1 matches, but overall I watch pretty much every match of this major. I'm really enjoying watching MW2 and just the COD League in general, and looking to make a little bit more COD League content on my channel. With that being said, drop a like, sub to the channel, and I will see you all in the next video.